Hi, my name is Rick Bloodworth. This is the Common Sense Christian channel, and today I want to tell you of a time that I was saved by a cockapoo. Now, cockapoo, for those of you who don't know, is a mix between a Cocker Spaniel and a Poodle. I think this one actually had a little bit more Cocker Spaniel than it did Poodle, but we used to joke that it was more Poo than it was Cocker. It was just an ornery little dog, but it was a good companion. And in this particular incident, I had been on a camping trip to Colorado. I'd come back from college. We lived in Casper, Wyoming at the time, and just went south until I found a place between Rifle and Craig, Colorado, a public access road called Cow Creek. And I went off on that and had a really nice camping trip. But as I was coming back home, somewhere after I crossed the Wyoming border, found a rest stop, and there weren't any cars around this rest stop. And I knew better, even at the age of 19 or 20, than to stop at a rest stop that didn't have anybody there. But the situation being it was, I stopped. And so I parked my car in the parking lot and hiked up a little ways. It was probably about 50 feet, 100 feet up to the rest area. And when I got inside, a couple of guys came out of the shadows. And since I hadn't seen any cars in the parking lot, I knew that I was probably in a little bit of trouble, especially for them just to be inside lurking around. Now again, I'm 19, 20 years old. I considered myself pretty tough at that time, but I can tell you, when those two guys came out, I didn't feel so tough at all. And they asked me if they could have a ride. And I told them, no, I don't have enough room in the car. And so they let me know at that point that I was, in fact, going to be giving them a ride. Well, I was coming out of the rest place at that point, and there, up ahead where I'd parked my car, my dog was just going crazy. And the car was dusty from the trip, so you could see a dog's head through the windshield, but you couldn't see much more. But he was sure making a racket. The window was cracked a little bit, and so they could hear him barking. And so I said to those two guys, you see that dog up there? He's not going to let you in that car. And it bluffed him. and they let me go. And I can remember getting back to the car and just almost shaking. And it was one of those situations where you didn't really know how to feel about it. Were you making a bigger deal about it than you should have been? You know, just being in an area where a couple guys come out all of a sudden, that can spook you a little bit to begin with. But anyway, that was back before the time of cell phones, and certainly I was a long way from the nearest town. And what was I going to do? Was I going to report these two guys and you know, go into a town and find the local sheriff and say there were two boys that scared me? And so I just kept on going. But I wished I hadn't, because it wasn't too long after that in the news there was an elderly couple that was killed by a couple of young men at a rest stop there in Wyoming. Now, I have to tell you, I don't know if it was the same rest stop. I don't know if it was the same day. I don't know if it was the same two young men. But I can tell you, it really made me stop and think. And it made me very appreciative for the fact that as I look back upon it, God rescued me from a situation. And again, while I wished I could have done something for the elderly couple, it was one of those times where I was young and inexperienced and really didn't know what to do. And I don't know that I could have even done something. Again, I'm not even sure it was the same situation, but it was awfully similar, and it was an unusual coincidence if it wasn't the same situation. The passage I want to read to you is found in Psalms chapter 33. It starts in verse 16, and it says this: "No king is saved by the size of his army. No warrior escapes by his great strength." Well, as it goes on, it says, "A horse is vain hope for deliverance. Despite all its great strength, it cannot save. But the eyes of the Lord are on those who fear him, on those whose hope is in his unfailing love, to deliver them from death and to keep them alive in famine. We wait in hope for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. In him our hearts rejoice, for we trust in his holy name. Well, let me ask you this. Is your hope in God? And do you trust in his holy name? As I mentioned, at that point of my life, I felt like I could take care of myself. I had certainly been in enough incidents in my life where that very thing had to be exercised a little bit, and so there were situations that I did have to, or at least I felt like I had to take care of myself, and so I felt pretty self-sufficient. Until there came a time where it was very clear that I wasn't as self-sufficient as I thought I was. And yet as I look back on this time, I really do feel that God rescued me. I don't know what he had in mind for me. I don't know. I have to admit that at that point I wasn't overly religious. I was certainly a Christian. I read the Bible some. I prayed some. Usually was at church on Sunday morning, if not Sunday night and Wednesday night. But I have to admit, my relationship with God certainly wasn't what you would call a mature one. But I still feel like God rescued me at that point. And he rescued me not by my own might, not by my own strength, but in this case, with a cockapoo, an animal that maybe weighed 25, 30 pounds at the most, that didn't have an awful lot of pack behind his bark, but he certainly could put on a good bluff. And fortunately on that day I was able to put on a good bluff too. Let me tell you a little bit about that dog. On that camping trip, or the year after that, he just disappeared on a little path that was down at the bottom of that valley where I was camping in Colorado, and I thought I'd lost him, and then all of a sudden he comes flying back around that corner, clearly being chased by something, and I was a little bit nervous as to what it might be. Well, a few moments later, some cattle came around the bend, just old cows or steers, and so he wasn't the bravest of dogs, is my point. And yet God was still able to use that dog, I believe, in order to rescue me on that day. I suspect you can look back at times in your life where you were in a dangerous situation. It may not have been from bad people, but it may have just been a tricky situation you got yourself into. And yet, somehow, in an unlikely way, you were able to get out of it. Well, I'm not saying for a fact that in that situation that God was looking over you, but I am suggesting that he very likely could have been. And he very likely could have been because he had another use for you. Your time was not over. And he found something of substance in you to save. And as I say this, I know that most people have been through different circumstances where when they look back on it, they have to honestly say, I had a better chance of not surviving than surviving. But why did you survive? And maybe it's because God had plans for you. Certainly God does have plans for you and for your life. And the question is, are you meeting his expectations? Are you just living for yourself? Are you just kind of getting by in life with maybe an attitude that's more of just a dabbling with religion? You pray to him when you need things. You worship when it's convenient. You read the Bible occasionally. But you're really not serious. Well, my encouragement to you today is to get serious. That it's very likely that God has spared you for good things in his service. There are probably people in this world whose eternal life, the best hope at coming into contact with Christ is you, because of your relationship or because of the circumstances or whatever it is. And so the question is, are you taking advantage of those circumstances? When you see somebody that's close to you that you know is struggling, do you have the courage to bring up what God has done for you and what God can do for them? Do you have the courage to talk to them and the love to talk to them about their soul? I realize that we're kind of cautious to do that. We're afraid that people might laugh, or they might think we're some kind of a religious nut, or we might even think that this type of a conversation will separate close friends. But let me ask you this as far as your friendship. Is your friendship, your relationship with somebody in this physical life so important that you would not bring to them the life-saving news of the gospel of Jesus Christ for fear of losing that relationship? Because if that's what you've been doing, as I have done in the past, then let me say this: your perspective is off. Your sense of what's most important is not right. And you need to correct that. Not just for your own relationship with God, but so that you can help others come to Christ. Christ will change people's lives. And there will certainly be times in your life where God will intervene for you. You might not even have known it at the time. You may have suspected it, but let's face it, we can't really be sure in situations like that. And we may never know until the judgment. We might not even be told at that time. But we do know this: we have had some narrow escapes in our lives, most of us who have gotten outside more than once. And it's very likely that God was watching over us at the time and helped to rescue us. Maybe it was with a horse, maybe it was with an army, maybe it was with a cockapoo. But he has the ability to rescue you from difficult situations. And once he's spared your life and given you more time, a wise man, a wise woman will then ask themselves, what is it that I need to be doing with that time? And the best answer that I've ever been able to come up with through searching the scriptures is to use that time in their service. Just be as good and decent of a person as you can. For sure, try and be the best and the strongest Christian that you can, without being righteous in your own eyes, without being Pharisaic about your beliefs. And then take your opportunities with those whom you have opportunity with to bring to them the life-saving news of Jesus Christ. If you'll do that, then you may find indeed someday that the very purpose of your having been spared from difficult situations was for just such moments that you might be able to exercise your service for the Master and help others to come to Him, that they might not be lost for all eternity. Have you ever had a close call and wondered if God didn't intervene? Well, again, maybe we'll never know if He did or didn't, but we can say this: He has created us, He has put us here on this earth, and doubtlessly He has rescued us numerous times. The question is, what will we do with our lives now that we realize that? Will we use it to help others, or will we just selfishly fritter it away, even though He's given us chance after chance, and maybe even some rescuing us from the very shadow of death? Well, short story today, short lesson, but I hope it's something that'll give you something to think about. If you'd like to do me a favor, hit that like button. It'll get the video to more people, or share it with others that you might think be interested in it. Subscribe to the channel if you like these types of little sermonettes, and hopefully there will always be something there that will give you something to think about and also something to hope for. We're going to heaven someday by the grace of God and the shed blood of Christ, if we will just do our small part. And part of that is appreciating what He's done for us in the past so much that we are going to serve Him to the best of our ability and help others with our lives now and in the future. Thanks for listening today. I pray that God will richly bless you as you seek to serve Him.